Hello and welcome. This is another one of my interviews with professionals throughout the country for our UCLA Special Issues in Education class. And today I have with me a dear friend and a professional expert in learning disabilities. Judy Basque hails from Washington, D.C. Judy, welcome. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Cindy.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I have a background in education and became an educational consultant about 15 years ago in order to help students who had learning challenges. I found that there wasn't anybody in the DC area at the time that was able to help these students, and there were really no resources for parents who needed to know about support. So I have 3 children, 2 of whom have learning disabilities, and a husband who has learning challenges himself. And so it's always been a part of my life in trying to promote and help these students achieve success.
And so when you've worked at a school, you've worked in different capacities working with students with learning disabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was a teacher for about 30 years. My last 14 were at a private school where I taught mostly middle school. A lot of students with ADHD or learning challenges like dyslexia, reading disorders, math disorders. In a progressive school, in a Montessori school, I've got Montessori training as well. And I taught high school Spanish and English. My major in college was Spanish and minored in education. And I was on admissions committees at my school, bringing in students to fit into our environment. We were very careful to make sure it was a good fit, and that's a philosophy that I still carry today, is the fit is really important for college. I've been a tutor and a mentor to other teachers. I taught the UC Irvine Learning Disabilities course as well. And I think that's it.
Well, I'd say that's quite a bit. But that gives you a real solid foundation for working with parents and families, and especially as a parent, that you understand a lot where the parents are coming from. So as a counselors and advisors, when we're sitting in our offices and families come in, what are some signs of a learning disability? What do you recommend as a counselor advisor that we're looking for?
Well, sometimes things seem to be what they're not, and it can go both ways. Sometimes you get a family that is very disorganized, and everyone comes in and they forgot to bring what they were supposed to, or the student comes and forgets to bring his notebook. Those are red flags to me to at least pursue a little bit to see if there's a problem with executive functioning, time management. And I should explain executive functioning. It's a term that means that there are certain factors that the student is not able to either start, initiate work, follow through, might procrastinate, might daydream, and there's just a lot of things that they're not getting their work done, they're not handing their work in, and yet they might have managed all the way through school up until high school. And what I find is the smarter the student, the longer they can go without it affecting them. But once the workload gets to a point where they can't stay on top of it just from their natural intelligence, they really have never developed the study skills to learn how to learn. And so often we'll find 10th and 11th graders coming to us because they're suddenly getting low grades when they've always been a straight A student. So that's a red flag for a possible student with ADHD or a reading disorder that never showed up until the reading volume got to that point. So I would say looking for uneven grades, students who might have the same course but have grades of A's and D's and then B's and D's throughout. Students who have D's in math or foreign language is often a red flag. Students who have really great grades and then one low grade randomly, my question to that student usually is, do you not like your chemistry teacher? And they'll say, how do you know? Well, these are students who are very black and white in their thinking. And if they think the teacher doesn't like them, they're not going to do any work for that teacher. And they don't see that it's hurting themselves. And that's a very common trait. Another common trait is doing your homework and not handing it in because no one reminded you. So those are sort of the easy ones. Some of the harder ones to look for are when there are reading challenges or when there's a math disability. So you might not really pick up on those, but if you sense anything at all, what I usually recommend is asking the parents, have you ever had any psychoed testing done for your child? Mm-hmm. That would be useful information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if a counselor, if a student comes into your office as a counselor and you're noticing these things like the unturned in homework, the uneven grades, then what next? What do you recommend? What are the next steps?
Well, if you have any suspicion at all, you certainly don't want to diagnose. I don't ever say, I think you have ADHD. I would never say that. And especially, oftentimes, families will come in with students with autism that's very mild and they don't even know that's what it is, but I pick up the social awkwardness or the poor eye contact. So what I'll say is, while we're going through this process, you came to me for a purpose because you feel like your child needs some extra support. What would help me is to have you get a psychoeducational report done, testing done, that can identify your child's strengths and some areas he needs to work on, because then we can really move forward in the right direction and your child will know what he needs to work on and what he's really good at. And we like to take a strengths-based approach to say if he's really good at something, let's use that as the path to be successful. So I might recommend 2 or 3 psychologists in the area to say, just give them a call and see, getting this testing done, that it's really going to benefit your child in the long run.
And so a lot of times, in my experience, as I've done that and helped families, they feel like their child isn't able to achieve at a higher education level, that they can't go to college. They don't know what accommodations are. So how do we educate parents of, one, what accommodations are and how they take advantage of them, and 2, that they can go on and go to college?
Well, that's a really good question. I spend a lot of time educating families. They'll come in saying things like, my son can't read, or the student herself will come in and say, my teachers told me I can't go to college. And I'll say, why? Well, because I can't read. And I'll say, how are you getting through high school? Well, I listen to books. I go, well, that's what you have to do then. Of course you can go to college. So I'm really letting parents know that in my experience, there are many colleges that are going to have support that your child needs. We just have to identify what they are. And out of the 2,000 colleges, there are hundreds and hundreds of colleges that make a special effort to support students. But going to the wrong college can be catastrophic and can be devastating to the student's self-esteem if they can't succeed. So before that, we want to find that college or those sets of colleges. And the way to do that is to know what the child needs. But we do a lot of educating of parents and talk about fit. And fit is true in general, but in addition to the fit you typically think about, now we want to make sure that the actual support, if a student needs time in a distraction-reduced environment, or that student needs a foreign language substitution, or heavy tutoring in math, all those things can be gotten at the right school. Time management assistance, weekly meetings with a coach. There are many, many accommodations that some schools offer. Other schools will say they offer them, and they look good on the website, and they look very comprehensive, but when you start to ask specific questions, you find out that they really don't offer it's too good to be true, and it's not accurate.
So you bring up a really good point in terms of colleges and the programs that they offer and how important it really is to visit the college and ask those questions. So when, as a counselor and advisor, when visiting that college, what are some of the questions you should be asking?
Well, I would say that, first of all, when you do visit a college on your first visit, you should also visit the disabilities office. There's no telephone line directly from disabilities to admissions to say, look at that kid in the red jacket who just left my office, he's heading your way. They actually embrace students who learn differently in the schools that do a good job. And there's no connection, and there's nothing wrong with identifying to the learning specialist. It's completely separate from admissions. But visiting is important because you want to see if you feel comfortable with the people there. Do you like what they offer? And it's also part of your college experience. Are you going to get the support you need? So some questions to ask, for example, are, do you have a learning center? Do you have a place for me to take a distraction-reduced test, a test in a distraction-reduced environment? Do you provide note takers, and how do you provide note takers? Every school will say yes, but some schools actually provide an anonymous note taker who is identified by the professor, takes the notes, and drops them off at the learning center for the students in that class to pick up. What you don't want is when they say, yes, we have a note taker, and you can ask someone in the class to take notes and we'll pay for the copying. I mean, that's not an accommodation, and that's not what is meant by a note taker. Foreign language substitutions, you ask that question. You can also ask, what is the culture on campus? Do you feel, as the learning specialist, that everybody accepts all students who learn in different ways? Is that part of who you are as a college? Because you might get a no, and you have to think about how important it is for you to go to a college that might not appreciate your differences.
And so, as how do we know which of, there's two questions. How do we know which colleges offer these different kinds of accommodations, which ones are offer more services versus less? And I probably, in relation to that, is I know there are different levels of support. Can you explain what those are first? And then how do we find the colleges at the different levels of support that you might need?
Cindy, I will give you a chart that I've created to share with your class.
Okay.
That is called the spectrum of support. And what it does is it identifies minimal support, ADA compliance, as one category, moderate support, which is fortunately where most colleges fall, a comprehensive support program, which is typically fee-based, and social support, which is for students with Asperger's or autism. There are many colleges now that have social support. And then you can see what the different characteristics are of all of those levels. And then when you're searching for colleges, you at least have that in your mind to know. Just as a brief example, at a college that I would call ADA compliant only, the dean of students might be the person who identifies students who grants accommodations. Whereas in a college that has moderate support, it will be someone with a background in learning disabilities or psychology that has some understanding of more than just accommodations and might actually provide some services.
Great.
And then where to find them, that's been a challenge. And in my 15 years of doing this, I've been doing all my own research. I meet with learning specialists all over the country. I basically interview them and ask them these same questions, and I get a sense of how good their department is. And I created a website called College Web LD for this purpose. I use it with my students, and it's available to consultants. Right now it's in Fairfax County Public Schools. They're beta testing it in 7 of their high schools, and they're using it with all of their students. It's basically like College Navigator or Peterson's or Princeton Review, specifically for students who have learning challenges. And you can search on there by the type of learning support you need, the part of the country, the size of the school. And then I have a write-up of explaining their services and a rating system for 4 categories of learning disabilities, so that you can see which ones they serve, because not every college serves all types of students. So that's one good resource. Another is there are several books out. There's a K&W Guide for Students with Learning Disabilities, and Wintergreen Orchard House has another guide for students with learning disabilities that I believe is now online. I don't know that they have a book anymore. That has some basic information along with their general information. So basically, it's not easy to find this information, and that's why I have published it.
And it is a great resource. And I think one of the other things that I want to make sure that our class understands is that, you know, when we find situations like this, unless we're the specialists, we need to be referring students out to somebody like you, like others that have that specialty, because there's a lot that goes into it.
That's a really good point. And I want to say, too, that I don't take neurotypical students. If I get a phone call from someone that requests my services, if they don't have learning disabilities, I will refer them to another consultant in the area, or if they're calling from out of town, to a consultant in their area, so that I can save space for the students who truly do need my services. And people refer to me, and sometimes they just give me the client, refer to me, and many times I co-consult. I'm happy to be in the background, actually just assisting the consultant, so the consultant still has a relationship with the family, but I'm sort of, in a way, training that person on what to do. I'm happy to do that as well. But I agree with you that this is something that needs to be done well for these students, because the outcome needs to really be carefully selected.
Right. Right. And I appreciate the comment about mentoring or co-coaching, because then that's how we can learn more and grow. And then it gives us more professional experience and expertise, so that we will be able to identify these situations more and be able to make the right recommendations and ultimately support our families, which is all of our goals together.
Exactly. I mean, there are plenty of families out there that don't even know about the type of counseling they could get.
Right.
And so all of us as a profession are educating, whether you're in a school situation or whether you're an independent consultant, we all benefit from teaching each other what we know.
I think, and I know in my experience in my area, I'm in a fairly rural area. I don't get families come in that say, here, my child has a learning disability. Sometimes that happens, but usually I'm the one that's looking at the transcript, looking at things, going, I think there might be something here. Let's check this out. And so I'm the one that's often referred people out for the psychoanalysis, or not the educational testing assessment. And most of the time it comes back with a diagnosed learning disability, and then we go from there. So that's oftentimes we're on the front lines as the advisors and helping family. And then they have to come to terms with, oh, my child has a learning disability. What does that mean? Yes. And that's a whole nother education in and of itself too.
Yes, that's true.
So if someone needs to get a hold of you, how can they do that, Judy?
Well, they can email me at judy@basseducationalservices.com. They can go on our website, basseducationalservices.com, or collegewebld.com. And our phone numbers are on the website, and you can always email me, and I'm happy to help in any way if people have questions that they need answered, just brief question that they're confused about or need some help with. I'm happy to even refer you to other people if I can.
Okay. And I'm going to refer them to the webinars that we've done before, and those resources too. But we'll look forward to getting the resources that you want to share too. So
Sure.
that would be great. Well, Judy,
Okay.
thank you very much for your time today. This has been very illuminating, and I know my class is going to appreciate hearing all these different tips and insights into working with their students who have learning differences. So,
Well, thank you very much, Cindy. It's been my pleasure.
all right.